Right now, special session number 4 likely. Governor Greg Abbott's taxpayer-financed education savings accounts for students to attend private school won't pass during this 3rd special session. The question now is, when will he call for the 4th special session to begin? End of an era. Longtime Congresswoman Kay Granger of Fort Worth says she won't run for re-election next year. We'll look at potential candidates to succeed her. One-on-one, we speak with Democratic candidate for U.S. Senate Colin Allred about his differences with Republican incumbent Ted Cruz about the Israel-Hamas war, how his position on a border wall in Texas came under attack by a Democratic opponent, and why he's risking his safe congressional seat in Dallas County to challenge Cruz. I'm Jack Fink. Get your fix for Texas politics. Eye on Politics starts right now. Hello and welcome. We begin in Austin, where a 4th special session is likely now that it's become increasingly clear that Governor Greg Abbott's push for taxpayer-funded education savings accounts for students to attend private school won't pass in the House during the 3rd special session, which is set to come to an end Tuesday. The development comes after a major reversal by the governor. He agreed to expand the special session agenda to include boosting public school funding and teacher raises in an effort to get his school choice or voucher program passed in the House, where rural Republicans have continued to balk, along with Democrats who strongly oppose. Governor Abbott had this to say Wednesday morning at an economic development event.
We are on track to ensure there will not be another special session. There is enough time to get everything done that we want to get done, that needs to get done, to avoid a special session.
His remarks surprised some Republican lawmakers because none of the school choice or funding bills have been considered by a committee in the House. Following Abbott's remarks, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick posted a statement on X that said, "I agree with Governor Abbott that there's still time, but only if the House subs their suggested language into Senate Bill 1, school choice, and Senate Bill 2, teacher pay raises. We passed both SB 1 and SB 2 to the House 3 weeks ago, and they have sat there all this time with no movement. With constitutional procedural requirements and House and Senate rules, there is simply no time to start over with a new House bill." The House stands at ease, which means Speaker Dade Phelan can call lawmakers back at any time. No word yet from the governor when he might call for the start of a 4th special session. Now to another legislative priority this session. The Texas Senate passed a bill prohibiting private employers from mandating workers get vaccinated against COVID-19 this week. Once it becomes law, companies who violate Senate Bill 7 could be fined up to $50,000. The bill now heads to the governor's desk. And now to an end of a political era in Fort Worth. After serving more than 25 years in Congress, Kay Granger announced she will not run for re-election. Congresswoman Kay Granger has served as a lot of firsts. First woman as Fort Worth mayor, first Republican woman in Texas to serve in Congress, and first Republican woman to become chair of the powerful House Appropriations Committee. And current and former elected leaders are praising her decades of public service.
And she was a trailblazer.
Former Fort Worth Mayor Betsy Price pays tribute to Congresswoman Kay Granger after she announced she will leave Congress at the end of her term late next year.
It's amazing how much of her own time and how much time her family has given. Kay truly is the epitome of a public servant.
Granger says serving her community has been her greatest honor and that she's encouraged by the next generation of leaders in her district. It's time for the next generation to step up and take the mantle and be a strong and fierce representative of the people. Current Mayor Mattie Parker says she has led with strength, tenacity, and character both in Congress and during her tenure as our city's mayor, and the lasting impact of her leadership cannot be overstated. They credit Granger's years of supporting the defense industry in North Texas and her commitment to getting federal funding for the Panther Island flood control project in Fort Worth. Mike Moncrief also served as Fort Worth's mayor.
She has certainly served us with distinction. She indeed delivered the goods for those who put her in office.
Republican State Representative Craig Goldman of Fort Worth, Republican Tarrant County Commissioner Manny Ramirez, and Chris Putnam, who ran against Granger in 2020, tell me they may run for Granger's seat. John O'Shea says he is running. As for who's not, Fort Worth Mayor Mattie Parker, former Mayor Betsy Price, and Tarrant County Judge Tim O'Hare. They all tell me they are not interested in Granger's congressional seat. The 12th congressional district represented by Granger is a safe Republican seat and is expected to remain that way. Other headlines across Texas: a federal judge has blocked the Biden administration from removing any razor wire installed by the state of Texas, at least for now. The motion stops federal agents from removing razor wire until a preliminary injunction hearing is held. Last Tuesday, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton sued the Biden administration, accusing federal agents of destroying state property by cutting the wire in the Eagle Pass area and allowing migrants to easily cross the border. The temporary restraining order is set to expire November 13th. And we've learned this week that an international hacker group targeted Dallas in a cyber attack. That group is threatening to publish sensitive information it claims it stole from Dallas County's computer system unless the county pays a ransom by Friday. This comes after cyber hackers targeted the city of Dallas in April. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton will stand trial on state securities fraud charges next year, April 15th. A Collin County grand jury indicted him on the 3 felony charges back in 2015, and his case has been delayed for years. Among the reasons, how much the special prosecutors will get paid. Attorney General Ken Paxton said nothing Monday morning as he walked into the Houston courtroom or during his hearing. Paxton's appearance comes nearly 2 months after the Republican majority in the Texas Senate acquitted him of the impeachment articles. The AG has pleaded not guilty to 2 counts of first-degree securities fraud and a third-degree charge of not registering with the State Securities Board. After the judge set April 15th as the trial date, the special prosecutors told reporters they believe he will get a fair trial.
This building, unlike, wait, give me a second. Oh, the Senate. The playing field's level and the truth matters. And the truth is that Mr. Paxton's going to have to answer for what it is that he did 8 years ago.
The issue over how much the special prosecutors should be paid remains unresolved. Harris County Judge Andrea Bell, who's now overseeing this case, has ruled the special prosecutors should continue receiving $300 per hour as promised when they were initially hired 8 years ago. They haven't been paid since 2016. The special prosecutors have now filed a petition with the state's highest court, the Criminal Court of Appeals, to uphold the judge's decision. Collin County has said the special prosecutors should not be paid any more than what they've already received. Donald Trump is in Texas this week. The former president and current presidential candidate was in Dallas Wednesday headlining a fundraiser. And on Thursday, he stopped in Houston for a campaign event at an engineering firm. Trump remains the favored candidate in the Republican presidential primary.
We're going to win the Texas primary. We're going to win it in a landslide.
According to 2 recent polls, he leads the other candidates by more than 40 percentage points. A University of Texas Politics Project poll shows 62% of people likely to vote in the Republican Party primary will vote for Trump. 13% of respondents said they'd vote for Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, and 7% said they would vote for former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley. All other candidates polled at 3% or lower. And a recent University of Houston, Texas Southern University poll showed similar results. 58% of registered Texas voters who said they planned to vote in the Republican primary said they were going to vote for Trump. 14% said DeSantis, 6% said Haley, and again, all other candidates polled at 3% or lower. Coming up, we go one-on-one with Congressman Colin Allred, who's running in the Democratic primary to unseat Republican Senator Ted Cruz, what he says about the Israel-Hamas war and securing the southern border. When Eye on Politics on CBS News Texas comes right back. Welcome back. Governor Greg Abbott arrived in Israel Thursday morning to show support amid the Israel-Hamas war. The governor shared these photos on social media, posing with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. According to a press release, the governor will meet with Israeli officials and visit with victims and families impacted by the Hamas terror attack last month. This week, we spoke with Democratic Congressman Colin Allred from North Texas, who's hoping to unseat Republican incumbent Ted Cruz. We spoke about the Israel-Hamas war and securing the southern border.
Like most Americans, I woke up the morning of that attack just in shock. I had actually earlier in the year visited one of the kibbutzes that an Israeli general described as being the site of a massacre. And these were folks who were the most peace-loving, basically community-oriented folks you could possibly come across. And it's just tragic. And I'm somebody who's always been a strong supporter of the U.S.-Israel relationship and will continue to be. And we have to make sure that we support our ally, Israel, in this moment. But we also, of course, I think have to continue to be a strong ally in terms of making sure that as Israel goes about doing what it has to do to protect its people, and that it has a responsibility, I think, to protect its people, that we try and protect innocent Palestinian civilians as much as we possibly can, and trying to get them the humanitarian aid that they need. This is a war with Hamas. It's not a war with all the people in Gaza or with all Palestinians, or certainly with the Muslim world.
You know, some people have called for a ceasefire. Do you agree with that?
Let's be clear, Hamas uses the civilians in Gaza as basically human shields. They fire rockets from sensitive places where they know that if there's a retaliation, that it could impact civilians. And Hamas does not care, in my opinion, about the lives of Gazans. They are putting them at risk every single day. And Hamas should free the hostages that they have taken. And they should do that immediately. And we should do what we can to try and provide humanitarian aid to the people in Gaza who have had to be relocated or being displaced. But it's premature to talk about any kind of ceasefire right now. What I think we have to talk about is how do we make sure that Hamas is no longer in power in Gaza, and also what comes next, and how can we try and make sure that we don't lose sight of what I think is the long-term goal of a two-state solution in which a peaceful and independent Palestinian state is next to a strong and independent and secure and Jewish democracy in Israel.
When I recently interviewed Senator Cruz, he criticized your position back in 2021 when you and many other House Democrats wrote to one of the U.S. senators asking him to release his hold on tens of millions of dollars in humanitarian aid to the Palestinians. And apparently there was an internal email by the Biden administration that cautioned about providing aid to the Palestinians, quote, due to its overall strength and level of control over Gaza, we assess there is a high risk Hamas could potentially derive indirect or unintentional benefit from U.S. assistance to Gaza. And I wanted to give you a chance to respond to that.
Well, listen, what we're talking about here is trying to use fully vetted and internationally recognized organizations to make sure that there's medicine and food and basic services provided to innocent Gazans who I think are under the tyranny of Hamas. And we do this all the time in many different contexts where we separate a government that we disagree with, which Hamas is the governing party in Gaza, from the people. And I don't know why Senator Cruz or anyone else is unable to do that in this context. Just because somebody has a government that's repressive, that they have no ability to get rid of even, that does horrible things, doesn't mean that innocent children or civilians don't deserve to be able to have some kind of basic access to services. And if you want to try and make sure that we are presenting our best values on the international stage, then you do that by reflecting our values and how we try and help people around the world, even if we don't agree with everything that's going on. And so this is not at all about supporting Hamas. And Senator Cruz knows that. We provided aid to Gaza for decades.
What do you make of the rise in anti-Semitism that we are seeing across the globe and here in the United States and on several college campuses as well?
I think it's completely unacceptable. And I think there's no room for this in our country. This harkens back to some of the darkest days that we all know about in our history. And it's unacceptable. You can even vociferously disagree with something that the state of Israel does without that letting bleed over into anti-Semitic attitudes towards Jews in the United States or around the world. That is unacceptable. And to me, we have to have leaders in all positions of any kind of influence pushing back on that, saying that's not who we are, calling it out.
I also wanted to ask you about border security. Earlier this month, as you know, the Biden administration said it needed to build 20 miles of border wall in Starr County. And you were criticized for supporting this by Senator Gutierrez, who issued a statement saying, quote, "Dysfunction in Washington has led to failed policies that do not address the root of the problem. Congressman Allred has now chosen to join the DC idiocy on this issue, and he's dead wrong. Trump's wall is not a solution." How do you respond to that?
Listen, our immigration system is broken, and we do need to address that. And we address the humanitarian crisis that we're seeing showing up at our southern border. And we need to have a senator in place who actually would know how to do that and can have some reach a bipartisan agreement to help us do this. Because right now in Ted Cruz, we have a senator who uses this only as a political wedge issue, who doesn't, I think, have any interest in really trying to find a bipartisan way forward to solve this. We've not had a comprehensive immigration reform since the Reagan era. And we've had a couple of agreements that have been bipartisan that have fallen apart in the presidency of George W. Bush and Barack Obama. And I know that Senator Cornyn is trying to work to try and find a bipartisan way forward. I know that we can do that when I'm in the United States Senate. But we also have to be very clear that we do have to secure our border, that every country has to be able to secure its border. And that has to be one of the components of this comprehensive reform that I'm talking about. That in some cases has some components of physical barriers. That's one element. That's not enough on its own. And it's certainly not something that I think should ever be a symbol of our country, but it's one component of it, in addition to technology, more funding for Border Patrol agents, and helping them in particular with the biggest challenge I see them facing now, which is fentanyl entering our country through our ports of entry and sometimes being carried over through illicit means.
Coming up, what Allred says about his decision to give up his safe congressional seat in Dallas County and run against Cruz, the two-term incumbent. Now to more of our interview with Congressman Colin Allred, one of a large number of Democrats hoping to unseat Republican incumbent Ted Cruz. Why is he giving up his safe congressional seat in Dallas County, and why does he think he's the best candidate for U.S. Senate?
I feel really strongly that we can't afford 6 more years of Ted Cruz representing us in the United States Senate. I think Texans have seen that we can't count on Senator Cruz to be there for us in a crisis, whether it's when 30 million Texans are freezing in the dark and he decides to go on vacation. I think he's been one of the most divisive figures in our politics in the country, who's pitted us against each other. And I believe in a very different Texas. I was raised by a single mother here in Dallas who was a public school teacher. My community helped me chase my version of the American dream, from Baylor to the NFL to becoming a lawyer and to Congress. And I want to make sure that the state that I know is reflected in the United States Senate.
If you are elected, what are your top priorities?
One of the biggest differences will be in terms of temperament and being able to work across the aisle to get things done. I am proud that I was recently named by an outside group the most bipartisan member of the Texas delegation. And I understand that regardless of how this election turns out, that we're a divided state and that we have a lot of strongly felt passions on both sides of the political issues and from folks who might not feel engaged in our politics. And I want to be their senator as well. For the folks who don't vote for me, who don't agree with me on everything, I'll be their senator as well. But we are also a state that is growing incredibly rapidly. That brings a lot of challenges for us, but also opportunities. I'm proud that I voted for the infrastructure bill that is bringing $35 billion to the state over the next 5 years. I think Ted Cruz did the wrong thing in voting against that. I know that we have to make sure that we're continuing to lower costs and trying to get a hold on inflation, make sure that this economy works for everyone in our state. That's always going to be one of my top priorities because I was raised by a single mother. I understand what that means. And I want to protect our democracy because I think that what we saw on January 6th and what we've seen in the years since then and even before then is so much faith being lost in our democracy. And it's really at the heart of everything we do as a country, of our economic power, of really leading the world. And for us, if we lose our democracy, we'll lose everything else.
You look at the polls, you just talk to people. They're not happy about prices in the grocery store. They're not happy about housing prices. A mortgage now, and interest rates have gone up. A 30-year mortgage is now over 8%. So what is your solution to that?
Well, I think that what we're seeing is that we're still coming out of a global pandemic. And when you look around the world, the United States is better positioned really than anyone. But that doesn't mean, of course, that we don't have work to do. I think it's important that we find the areas in our economy that we know we can control costs for folks and help them get ahead, particularly when it comes to your healthcare. I'm proud, worked hard to try and lower the cost of healthcare, from capping the cost of insulin at $35 a month for folks on Medicare. I think it was the wrong thing to do, that Ted Cruz didn't support that, and he was one of the folks who prevented us from doing that for all folks across the country. I want to make sure that we're lowering those costs, lowering the costs of childcare, trying to address the areas that I know hit families and hit folks who are working hard to stay in the middle class the hardest.
And because Allred's seat will be open next year, it's attracted more than a dozen candidates in the Democratic primary. This week, State Representative Reetta Bowers of Garland announced she's changed course and will not run for Allred's seat. Instead, she's seeking a fourth term in the Texas House. The Democratic frontrunners for Allred's seat include Dr. Brian Williams, a Dallas trauma surgeon, and State Representative Julie Johnson of Farmers Branch. If you feel like there's always a lot of political news to keep up with, you're certainly not alone. And here at CBS News Texas, we've got you covered 7 days a week, not just on Thursdays and Fridays when we air Eye on Politics. And we want to show you how we've redesigned our website to help you keep up. If you go to cbsnewstexas.com, you'll see this Eye on Politics icon right on the homepage, and it'll take you here. We post full episodes of Eye on Politics at the top, but we also post local and Texas political news in this section. And here we have our weekly political explainers. And if you scroll down a little bit more, you'll see our full interviews with our elected leaders. Before we go, we just have to take a minute to celebrate the new World Series champions, our World Series champions, the Texas Rangers. As you can imagine, tons of people are so excited about Wednesday night's huge win, including our elected leaders. Governor Greg Abbott said congratulations in a post on social media, saying another trophy for Texas. Fort Worth Mayor Matty Parker also weighed in, congratulating the Rangers. And George W. Bush, the former president and governor of Texas, said, "I'm thrilled for the Texas Rangers fans tonight. This was baseball at its finest." Sure was. And that's all for Eye on Politics this week. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Jack Fink, and I hope you'll tune in again next week. You're watching CBS News Texas.